Hi, I'm Jeff Lawton. I've just got some fresh food on the end of the line, and this is how easy it is. Once you set your system up with a bit of abundance, you can get fresh food straight out in front of your kitchen. There you go. Beautiful. If you haven't seen the first video, I encourage you to go back and check it out. We showed you exactly what can be done in deserts, in the subtropics, and the cold climates. We gave you an idea that this is possible in the suburbs, in acreage, in large landscapes. You don't have to own land. You can be renting land. You can just get access to land. This is a design system that's possible right across the world. Check out our first video, because we're going to move on now and show you not just the opportunity, but how you can do it for yourself. How, if you take a permaculture design course with a competent teacher who has experience, they can give you that confidence to move forward and supply yourself with everything you need for a sustainable, secure future in these times of uncertainty and potential crisis. Our first video has had thousands of views and there's over 1,000 comments, and it's great to see, and I've really enjoyed answering your questions. This is obviously something that's of great interest and something that people want to know about en masse. So we're going to do what we can to provide you with that information. Education online is something that's obviously in great demand and is of great importance. Now we're going to give you that all-important property purchase checklist. So many of our students and clients say it would have been so much easier if they'd had this sort of advice before they purchase property, if they've already got property before they develop it. And if you don't have property or you can't purchase property, how you go about applying design to the land access possibilities that you have. If you are renting property, or if you're thinking about buying property, if you already have property, design can be applied so that you can supply your needs in the best possible way, so it is efficient and you get a good result for the energy and effort you put in. And this, of course, can save you so much money. So we're really happy to be able to give you this information to make things easier for you and your family and your community as we go forward into a positive future. Access. Access is one of the most important things to make sure you can plan really well. Access can be expensive in many ways. The cost of installing access, the cost of maintaining access, the cost of vehicle maintenance because you haven't got good access planned. It's a very expensive element and it adds efficiency to a system. It can be a fire break, it can be a heat store, it can be a windbreak planning in relation to water catchment. It can cause water erosion, or it can be a water harvesting feature. Let me show you about access, but first I'd like to say the most passive access is on contour. The next is down the center of ridge lines. That way you get an even and passive distribution of water. The ultimate access is, of course, multifunctional. This access road that we've put in is perfectly on contour. It's so easy to maintain. It stays very, very stable. So here is a very simple collection pit from the V-drain and a pipe that goes underneath the road. So we have a passive water collection running off the hard surface of the road. Even light rains start to collect water quickly, and then it feeds through under the road. So I'm in the center of the access road here, and it's graded in both directions very passively, just a 2% grade from center. So the road water here runs to the upside and the V-drain and passively into the collection pits, and the pipes take it under the road. The water from the middle to the outside runs that way off the contour hard surface towards the landscape. Together they join another system. It becomes a water security collection now, which goes to living systems. Let me show you what happens at the other end of the pipe. The water path comes through here passively, falls into the swale, increasing water security and growing a food forest on the system. Now we've linked access to water security and a growing system, all to our benefit. So you need to be able to see this as a design plan priority. Water, access, structural positions. Very important to understand those three main elements in planning. Another crossing pipe under an access road on the property. We're holding on to water. We're holding it as high as we can for as long as we can with a passive soak. This is water security. We don't want to exit water off the property. We want to take water on the longest path, over the most distance, over the most time, with really passive friction, rubbing up against living things all the way. Where we can harvest hard surface runoff, we do, and we soak water. We stop it, spread it, and soak it. Let's go through a property purchase checklist. So this is what we're talking about. The checklist for purchasing a property. The first thing we need to think about is which climate are we in? So that's a climate analogue. In that climate analogue, we've got to think about what latitude are we, north or south of the equator? What is the altitude above sea level, or in very rare occasions below sea level, which are rather rare, but do exist. Every 100 meters you go up is like going 1 latitude away from the equator, but day length doesn't change because of altitude. You have to bear that in mind. Now, the other element in climate analogues, the distance from an ocean or a large body of water, a sea or a very large lake. This affects the climate, and it makes a difference whether it's east coast or west coast. There are hot climates, the tropics and the dry hot deserts, where you actually want more shade. And there are cold climates where you want more sun emphasis. So is it too shady in a cold climate? Or is the shade an asset because you're in the tropics or you're in a hot, dry desert? Or are you looking for sun because you're in a cold climate? This makes a difference when you're purchasing a property and you want to design a food security system. What is water? Where are the water positions? Where's the potential for water storage on the property? And ideally, it's as high as possible. You're going to look uphill optimistically for water storage because you can always bring it down to you. You can drop down for free with gravity. Energy not required on gravity feed water systems. Access. If we're looking at access, we have to look at how easy is the access within the property. Where are the entry points? Where do we need to get to across the property? Internal access can be very expensive to build, very expensive to maintain, and very costly on lifestyle. All the access through the property, within the property, has to be considered. Access, if it is extensive, needs to be multifunctional. Is it a water harvest? Is it a heat sink? Is it fireproof? Does it fireproof the property? Is it a fire barrier? Then we can make an assessment about where the ideal structural positions are. Where are you going to place the house? Where are you going to place the buildings? What are the earth structures that are going to be needed? And once we know water potential, once we know access possibilities, then we can make sensible decisions about where structures can be positioned. All of this makes a difference if you're going to design yourself a landscape that's going to be abundant and food secure, and you're going to be in a situation where any kind of crisis can easily be survived. So steepness is something. The landscape profiles. How steep is it? Steep land is very difficult. It takes very specific and expensive earthworks. It's very awkward as far as keeping landscape stable. It has gravity assistance, but if it's too steep, there's too much gravity as an assistance. So once it gets over 20 degrees slope, it gets to be very difficult to keep secure if it's not in some kind of tree system. Flat landscape is much easier, but if it's extremely flat, it's very close to being absolutely flat, then you get very little gravity assistance. You're going to have to pump water uphill. You're going to have to pump it up to tank stands to get any kind of gravity fall. You're going to have very low head pressure. It's something to be considered. It is easier landscape. It also suffers from wind effects. So you're going to get a lot of wind erosion. You're going to get a lot of wind buffering of climate. You're going to get hot winds in the hot climates, in the deserts particularly. In cold climates, you're going to get cold effects from the wind. You're going to have to put up windbreaks. But wind, the problem, can be the solution for the gravity of water. Wind can be used to pump water. That's another infrastructure if you're going to have to put up a windmill. All of this needs to be considered. Fire. Fire is one of the most damaging elements, and particularly in the Mediterranean climates, the hot end of the temperate climate. The Mediterranean climate still gets winter rain and very hot summers. You can get wet winters with a lot of vegetation growth, then a very dry hot summer, and you get that incredibly dangerous fire potential. What is the fire potential? You're going to build up a system that can be destroyed in just a few hours if you don't fireproof your system. That can be all related to this infrastructure and water positions. The opposite to fire, the absolute opposite, is flood. Do you know where the 100-year flood line is? What are the flood events? Climate is getting more erratic. You need to understand that fire and flood can be on the increase. Wind can be more dramatic. Climate variations. You need to buffer all this by design, placing elements in fundamentally important foundation, mainframe design positions. You need to understand design. Vegetation cover. What is the size of the property in relation to the vegetation cover? If you're in an urban situation, too much large vegetation causes too much shade, and if it's not of value and use to you, that limits what you can do. Large properties on the other end of the scale can have too much cleared landscape. You can't keep it cleared without grazing very large areas or continuously clearing regrowth. You're going to have to let it regrow itself through the forest, which often means it's going to go through a weed cycle first and have different pioneering systems developing before it goes back to forest. All of that should be considered. What sort of vegetation cover do you have on the land in relation to the size? Size is going to make a big difference here. In the suburbs, shade and sun are going to be crucial, that you have enough sun or enough shade to go into a productive system. Larger landscapes, you've got to consider the vegetation cover. All of this is going to make it so much easier to purchase land that is some land that can be developed so that you can go into a productive, sustainable, and long-term, crisis-secure landscape. Many people regret purchasing property once they realise the elements they should have considered before they make their purchase choice. Let's get it right. Let's help you understand the properties that are of value to you as a survivor, because they're not always understood by the general public. Often doesn't mean they're more expensive. Often they can be quite cheap properties. People don't recognise the sustainable elements that are useful to crisis survival lifestyle property. When you're looking at country that's this steep and drops off so dramatically, you really limit your options of what's possible. This is very difficult landscape to work in, and if you're going to work in this sustainably, really you're limited to very, very detailed specific earthworks, or it just regenerates back in the forest through weed cycles like this. There are very few options. Well, here's a classic. Brand new house, right on top of the hill, got a great view, very limited opportunity for water. They're catching a lot of water off the roof, and they're taking it all the way down behind the garage. There's 3 big water tanks. They're quite a lot lower than the house. They're going to have to use electricity to pump it back up. So they've thought about their water, but they preferred the view to water. They'll probably change over time, especially with the situation as it gets more and more desperate and food security gets more and more of a problem. This is a situation we see all the time. There'll be a lot better positions lower down where we could get below good gravity water catchment. When we look at landscape profiles, a lot of people want to settle the top of the hill. So they're looking at positioning the house for a view. This is well above any water storage. Also, you can find that people want to settle down close to the river here, at the bottom of the hill, down near the river flat. Now, both are extremities in the landscape. Up here, we're above any potential water storage, and we're up in the wind. And it's an expensive place to get access to quite often. Down at the bottom, all the cold air sinks down to the bottom of the hill, and down here, we're in a cold air lake, where there's an accumulation of cold air in the winter, plus there's the potential of flood from the river itself. The mid-slopes, when we settle somewhere in the mid-slopes, we get the best of both worlds. Here, when it goes between the convex slope of the top of the hill to the concave transition, this is where we can store water. From here down, it's possible to put in water storage systems. From here down, we can revegetate, so we can get into sheltered positions. We can put in productive systems. We can actually crop down in the river flat here, main cropping systems. Above, on the steeper slopes, we can put security forest in, because that's the only thing that's worthwhile on the steep slopes. We could put a summer house at the top. If we had flat land, we could graze the top, but usually the top of the hill is also security reforested. Now, when we do this, we're in a situation where we have endless gravity water. We have the use of the river flats, We have the nutrient coming down from the top of the hill. We have a system in this inner zone where we can get a design security position. So it's often the mid slopes, the moderation between the flat bottom cold floodplain to the top high dry windy positions. When we move into that option of moderation of the best of both worlds, we start to get real potential design abundance. Here's a classic landscape for you. Beautiful gentle hill there, steep at the top, nice steady slope in the middle and flat at the bottom. And we've got a driveway. Someone's put an expensive driveway in, one that's going to take a lot of maintenance. It's going to need a lot of pipe infrastructure to run water off. Water is going to race down that driveway and cause all kinds of maintenance problems unless they put multiple crossing pipes. And it's only been done to get a house site at the top of the hill where they'll never have any water above them. They'll be pumping water forever. It's all done for a view. Now, if we look across here, there's a valley with a key point dam, a dam that can be put right at the top of that valley and right at the start of the driveway. Almost an unnecessary feature. In fact, I would say an unnecessary feature. We could put a beautiful house site. It would have water above it. It would have access to the gentle slopes in the mid-slope area and also the flat productive country at the bottom, which is not quite flood, but it is definitely a cooler, colder landscape. So we could get the best of both worlds. We could be in the mid-slopes, get used to the bottom slopes, reforest that ridgeline, get the nutrient flow coming downhill, and we win 3 different ways. Okay, if we look over this way, we can see that the windmill here is having to pump water off the flat landscape up to header tanks. And that's quite obviously the situation that you're in flat country. But just looking uphill, just a few hundred meters, and you have quite nice catchment gullies. There are areas here that you could put high dams and gravity feed down to that productive flat country. Would fit in here just perfect, straight across here. Easy, not an expensive job. Up above the gullies, there's quite good reforestation and nutrient flow. The steep country in this particular situation is already forested. It's coming through into stability. It's already quite stable. It's these mid-slopes, above the flat, below the steep country, where we can harvest water, get below that water gravity fall, we can get free productivity by contouring out and repatterning the landscape. Production by design. Okay, here's the water tank the windmill pumps to, but this is the ideal house site. There's a gully on the right, a good dam site, a gully on the left, gully on the other side. We can put multiple sets of dams across here. We can have a view of water facing the sun. Beautiful, moderate situation with slope, above the cold flat, below the nutrient flow of the forest on the steep country. These are ideal landscape positions. This is all easy mainframe foundation design work. It's easy to do when you know how. You can't miss these basic points once you've done your design certificate course. It's fundamental design systems. So we've come out here to have a look at this property. It's advertised, it looks a little bit rough, but when you get out here, you can see that it is quite rough. It's not well used, but we could easily turn this around. So this is definitely an opportunity for the right person who knows how to design. So looking at this property here, we have the middle slopes again, not really being used, and nice high gullies that could be dammed for gravity feed water. As we sweep across the landscape, The landscape is just overgrazed, completely cleared, and really quite heavily degraded. 2 more gullies here, both with potential high dam sites at the top of the middle slopes. And as we go on around the landscape, you can see that they're actually clearing the top of the hill. The steep slope is being cleared for more grazing, and yet the middle slopes, which are better quality, are already overgrazed and degraded. But as we go on round, we can see that there has been quite high quality forest, and there's still some remnant patches left on the steep slope. So more gullies, more water catch, all more or less on contour, can be linked by swales, so water could be slowed, more clearing on the hills, and again more forest. So the ideal reforestation should take place where the deforestation is taking place, and the cows are on the better country in the middle slopes, above the flat but below the steep, and there's just one dam site on the property that is in position already, and the cows are walking up to that and degrading the dam, and the dam spillway is heavily eroded. Rather than put in nice subtle dams in the high positions where we can gravity feed a diversity of trees and different polycultural elements, it's just a simplified system in position with straight line fences and degraded elements. This would be an easy property to develop with good pattern application. The opportunity is there. You can see it in the landscape with the water flows and the potential to polyculturally design this into absolute abundance. Now we're going to take you onto the design table. Now we're going to take this to a lot more detail and map this out and show you what really could be done if we really extend design from that contour line through. So we have a little dam here that I pointed out on the landscape, and a contour line joining it to another valley dam here, through to another valley dam there, and on round to another valley dam here. We saw all these quite clearly on the landscape. So here we go, going round on that contour line. We can see that there's this great big linkage between dams, contours, and water harvesting systems. Now that contour line goes on around the landscape. You can see how that would increase the catchment to each of these dams, but also potentially share the nutrient. Now, there is a big dam that's already on the property, or a sizable dam, with quite an eroded spillway because it's overgrazed around it. But if you look at that on the map, after looking at the main line, you can see this dam is also connectable across the landscape. Now we've got patterning really starting to take place. We've got a system where we're harmonizing with the landscape itself and the energy that shaped this landscape. We've got multiple little dams coming round this landscape, and we're starting to see a sensible way of dividing landscape. If we move up to the top of these valleys, there's also another line right at the very top where we can connect water storage to water harvest on through the landscape, down to contour line connections and on through. This starts to give you a real patterning of landscape potential. You can see this straight away online. You can see this on the landscape. This becomes a forested contour line division. Gathering nutrient, harvesting water, rehydrating landscape, refertilizing the soils, and giving you a very passive, harmonious rehabilitation. of what could be a very, very beautiful property. Now, when we look at the steep country above this, there's absolutely no reason to have that cleared. So there's a whole zone here that may as well just go back into forest. And that in itself is a nutrient flow. There's a natural accumulation of nutrient in biosphere forest or farm forestry combinations. That nutrient comes down through this system. Now, when we look at a sensible position here to establish a house site, it's not far off the road, somewhere in these mid to lower slopes here. There's an ideal situation where a house site, home garden, home orchard is just oversupplied with water, nutrient, and a very easy access set of lines dividing the land use patterning. That is simply a main frame. That's all that is. It's unavoidable that you can see that. It's inevitable that you can see that after you understand design through a permaculture design course experience. That will be a standard vision for you. From there, evolutions iterate into really interesting complexity that will give you something that is extremely stable, fertile, and permanent. Let's just put a sensible bit of access into this design. There's already a road in here, and this is a ridge line, a very easy road access straight in here. Then we can access along the back of these swales and dams and get good water access easily. We have a patterning of access that is also harmonious to landscape. We can quite easily come down ridge lines in between dams. Let's take this design a little bit further into defining the land use in between these contour lines, these defined swelled forest lines. If we look at the valleys on the property between these dams, they would be ideal reforestation areas. So they define a flow pattern that is already shaped into the landscape. When these are reforested, it defines the area of use between the swales. Now we have a whole set of cell grazing paddocks. We have a set of grazing or cropland areas. Could be grazing, it could be crops, or it could just go into reforestation if that's what you prefer. And if you want to go into functional landscape that you can actually use, we're defining areas here that are incredibly stable. These are all crop or cell grazing patterns so that we can rehabilitate this landscape within that zone. That's without going up above where there are more and more divided areas. All of this enhanced by tree growth, division. We know that agriculture is deficient in the effect of trees. So now we've got quite a different set of land use pattern functionality. When we get to the lower slopes here, these lower sections are going to be running water permanently. There's a moderation here of flood and drought. So instead of a flood event and then a drought event, a long-term drought, a flash flood, we're going to get a continuous trickling flow of water in the lower sections. So down here, we have an endless flowing stream event coming through this lower landscape. If we want protein, and we're not prejudiced about what type of protein, here we can go into fish ponds. Here we can have fish ponds off contour because they can be on the side of the hill. We have so much gravity flow. We have a system here where the top swales more than 15 meters above the house site. They're more like 18 or 20 meters. So we have good gravity irrigation systems. We have an abundant potential for gardens and orchards around the house site system. So this is a more intense set of patterning land use function. Now if we go back to the landscape in its present form, let's just have a look at the patterning in the present land use situation. So here is the pattern that's presently on the landscape. We have a harmonious water flow, yes. We have a scattered tree growth, but we have a complete grid line of straight lines, rectangles, that have no relationship to the landscape whatsoever. There's no real harmony involved. There's just a set of blocks. It's an exploitive, extractive pattern, and that's exactly what it's done to the landscape. It hasn't returned any surplus of energy harvest. It hasn't increased diversity. It hasn't increased soil fertility or soil humus. It's a simplified and simplifying extractive pattern. That is not beneficial to us or the landscape. We have to design so that we care for the earth and we care for the people on the earth, and we return a surplus of freely available energy into the abundance that is the potential. Remember, send in your comments, because we really want to know what it is you think of the property purchase checklist that we've provided for you, because it helps us provide more information, and we want to provide the information that you desire. So put your comments in down below here. Look out for an email from me next week, because we have something very special that we've been working on, and we're just putting the final touches to it. So don't miss out, because this is something that's really going to help you a lot. The next video, we're going to really expand on the potential. Once you know what sort of property you're moving on to, whether you're going to work on a balcony or a small tiny garden in the suburbs, a small acreage, a medium acreage, a large acreage, even expansive landscape, we're going to show you the potential of what's possible in all these different situations, so that you can really feel confident that this design system is the one that's really going to help you be secure in the future.